Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Adam Winters. I am Joe Gould. Today, we're continuing our video games into movies series, and we're talking about Street Fighter from 1994.
I think there's an argument to be made. This is the second Street Fighter film. If we're going to put Sony Chiba, the Street Fighter, I've never seen it, but it is in the 70s.
Okay.
So
we
ought to be able to call this Street Fighter 2, in my opinion, but because it is Street Fighter 2.
Ironically, they released Street Fighter 2, the animated movie, earlier in the year.
Ooh, I've seen it. I like this one better, though, the live action.
I don't think I've seen the animated ones. I was never a huge Street Fighter kid. Wasn't bloody enough. More of a Mortal Kombat fan.
Street Fighter started everything, though. The one-on-one fighter. It really Street Fighter 2 really put everything on the map, and everybody got in the imitation game.
Well, no, I agree with that. And it's not that I didn't enjoy the game. I was just never really into it like some people were.
I'm a Ryu player myself. I have won a tournament playing as Ryu.
Okay, let's start with that. My entire life, I thought his name was Ryu.
Well, that's what we called the guy from Ninja Gaiden, too. Ninja Gaiden. Ryu from Ninja Gaiden.
Yeah. Now, in my defense, in this movie, he is Ryu.
Oh, he was Ryu in all the Capcom American whatever. Toy line. Everybody said Ryu.
So, I don't know.
Break old habits.
Well, he's officially Ryu in this movie.
Yes. And Bison is Bison. And Balrog is Balrog. Because, real Street Fighter fans will tell you, they'll always remind you, in Japan, they swapped the name of all the bosses on account of Mike Tyson. But I like the name M. Bison. And I know the reason they switched it, because they didn't want to get sued by Mike Tyson, the boxer. But I like the name Bison as a big bad. I like it better than Vega. Vega sounds like something out of a Quentin Tarantino movie. Just a low-level thug.
Well, so if you say Ryu and I say Ryu, we're talking about the same person.
Indeed.
Hard to break a habit like that.
Indeed.
And I think if the video game itself doesn't have audio and it doesn't tell you how to say something, and then the movie comes out and they say a certain thing, I think that is canon at that point. Like, especially if the movie makes $300 million, because that's what everybody hears at that point.
So the video game announced all the country names, but they never announced the fighter names, did they?
They probably didn't know how to say it.
Well, it came from Japan, so it would have been a Japanese audio unless they redid it.
Yeah, I don't know. Also, in English, it should be Ryu, just be clear.
Ryu! Ryuken! Sure, Ryuken! See, that's funny.
That would be the argument, but, I don't know.
The uppercut, Shoryuken, the Dragon Punch, has both of their names in it, Ryu and Ken. I like that. Ken Bastards. Ryu,
that is
whatever.
Interesting. That is
Ryu
interesting.
Mario.
So this movie was successful from a financial perspective.
Indeed.
And the budget was $33 million. It grossed $33 million domestically, $66 million international. So it grossed just under $100 million. They sold more than 250,000 rental tapes in 95.
Really?
So total home video releases and broadcast earned $165 million.
We had this question on Mario Brothers. Was this available on VHS to buy? You'd mentioned rentals.
I don't think it got a VHS released.
Wow.
Okay. All right. So I see this note now. It was initially for rental video stores, but it did later get VHS.
And
so I guess we forget this back in the day, and that is that, the rental business was a big deal.
Oh, huge.
And you would do it was kind of the equivalent of, you could almost view it as, we're going to do digital streaming prior to putting out the Blu-rays today.
Except everybody has to pay for this individually, not just look at the statistics and ad revenue.
Yeah.
I should mention, because if we get into talk about DVD and Blu-rays later, this movie got a Laserdisc release very early on, and it had a director commentary on the Laserdisc, and they have carried that Laserdisc commentary onto DVD and Blu-ray.
Okay. Did you listen to the commentary?
I did. Steven D'Souza, the writer, who apparently had to write a script up overnight. He was told by somebody that Capcom of Japan employees were going to be in America, and the Universal Studio representative, they wanted to make a pitch to him while they were in America. And so they called D'Souza and asked him if he was familiar, and he was familiar with the games. He played it with his son, probably the home console version, and he pulled an all-nighter with a basic story idea, but he had a condition. He said, I have to be the director. And they said, okay, sure. So that's how he got the gig. First ever directed movie. He was the same guy who wrote for Blade Runner and Die Hard, among several other action movies he was the writer on. But this is, I think, his directorial debut.
Yeah, I think he said, I did a new interview with him, and I was thinking he said, in the new interview, he said 48 hours, but it's same difference.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, there was some equivalent of a Cheech and Chong movie that he directed like 20 years prior. Like
Never
a lower
seen
brow
those.
version of it.
Yeah.
It may not have been released, but he directed it whether it got a release or not. But I think it won
Is
some
that who he
Indie Award or
modeled
something.
Ken and Ryu after?
I don't know.
Ken and Ryu.
So I have the Blu-ray Steelbook.
Okay.
It was supposed to come with a Bison buck, but I didn't get one.
You deserve a refund.
Yeah. They had a bunch of new interviews with Steven D'Souza, Ming Na Wen, Damien Chapa, otherwise known as Ken, and the producer Edward Pressman. Also talked about Van Damme's career with Universal, kind of his rise to fame in general.
He factors into the Double Dragon movie. When we get around to that, maybe he'll come up again.
Okay. And there was a short thing about how the game compared to the film. There was something with the composer, which I didn't watch because time. There was a lot more on this disc than I thought there was going to be. Like 2 hours worth of bonus stuff.
There was a lot of popular artists who contributed music to this. MC Hammer, Ice Cube, Deion Sanders, of all people.
So yeah, there was something about the making of Street Fighter, some outtakes and deleted scenes, which really weren't that interesting.
I only got 2 deleted scenes. How many did you get?
2 or 3. I was fast forwarding through them. There really wasn't too much of substance there.
Sounds like your release is better than mine. I have the so-called Extreme Edition, which I had it on DVD, and then I bought a Blu-ray combo that had the Vin Diesel Doom movie on it. And I think they're the same, but they were probably adapted from the 1990s Laserdisc set, because it has a lot of references to that on that.
Yeah, this thing was cool because they got a lot of new interviews in 2021.
None with Raul Julia, unfortunately.
No, or Van Damme for that matter. I was hoping I'd get something there.
Yeah.
By 2021, his career not exactly taken off anymore. I feel like they should not get him for that.
I think the biggest thing he's done was the Kickboxer remake. Like, what's the last big thing Van Damme did?
Big thing's a strong word, but he did have his kind of return to relevancy with his JCVD Blu-ray, his bio that's not a bio.
I hadn't seen that.
And then, let me go over see here. He was in The Expendables 2. That was a long
time ago.
That was 2012.
That was a long time ago.
Let me see. There is something else. So he had a Amazon series called Jean-Claude Van Johnson.
Well, no, I don't like the sound of that.
It was actually pretty good. He played himself, basically.
He did a Super Bowl commercial, I think. I don't remember which one.
Voiced Jean-Claude in Minions: The Rise of Gru. I didn't see that.
Really? I think I saw that. I don't remember him. There you go.
So anyways, I always have a soft spot in my heart for Jean-Claude Van Damme. He was probably my favorite of all the action stars back in the day.
Okay.
Or kind of the underdog. If it wasn't him, it would have been Arnold. I appreciated Sylvester Stallone stuff later.
Yeah.
And Chuck Norris is always overrated to me. And the reason I say that is from the TV show, what was it?
Walker, Texas Ranger,
where he would never lose a fight, even though it just got kind of silly at some point.
They always involve spin kicks. I like the episode where he jumped in a NASCAR Cup car and he won the darn race for some reason.
Yeah, I know that was the whole premise of the show. It was ridiculous, but I was like, come on. At some point, you've jumped the shark.
Oh, yes. Although I'm surprised they didn't put that in the show.
And he was like 70 years old at that point.
He's still kicking, I think. Him and Dick Van Dyke.
I don't think Dick Van Dyke's kicking anybody, right?
He's exercising. He does his leg presses.
He sits. So one thing I didn't realize is I was a big S.H.I.E.L.D. fan, and I did not realize that Melinda May was in this movie until...
Ming the Win. You didn't realize that? Really?
Well, I hadn't seen this movie probably in 20 years.
Okay.
So, and obviously there was no S.H.I.E.L.D. back 20 years ago. So
I think she's fantastic in this movie.
No, she's great. And I will say she's like 61.
She looks great.
She looks like the exact same in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No aging for her. So we shall say that 11 million of the 30-ish million budget was off Van Damme and Julia. Yeah. They were about 11 million of the budget. Van Damme for 8 and Raul Julia for about 3 or 4.
And we should know it was important to Julia to do this movie for his family.
Yes, his kids were big fans. Sounds like almost everyone who worked on this movie, their kids either were big fans or later when they had kids, they were really thrilled because they became big fans.
Sound like a lot of them they played the game a lot themselves. So unlike the Mario Brothers movie where nobody cared about the source material, everybody seemed to enjoy it in this movie.
Yes, and we should also note that Street Fighter 2 was kind of the original Minecraft, and it basically was the game in the series for about 15 years, and they just kept remaking it into little tweaks here, little tweaks there.
Champion Edition, Turbo, Super the New Challengers, Super Hyper Fighting. They've even continued to remake it. Like, I forget what's on the Switch. Like the Ultimate version, Street Fighter Ultimate, which is basically Street Fighter 2.
And it was such a big deal when they finally came out with a Street Fighter 3. And
we should note,
no one liked it.
Well, hold on now. No. That's a different discussion. Street Fighter 3 has enthusiast appeal, but it does not have wide appeal like Street Fighter 2 did. But this movie was supposed to kick off Street Fighter 3, the game. And it did get a video game adaptation. If you want to talk about Street Fighter 3 disappointing, Street Fighter the movie, the video game, was a massive disappointment.
Yeah, Street Fighter Combat. I like it.
Oh, man. Now, I have it on Sega Saturn, and for the most part, it's okay as a Street Fighter game. It's not great. Some of the new characters are bizarre. Captain Sawada, did you remember him from this movie?
No. Well, I couldn't pinpoint his name, at least.
He's an actual Japanese guy who may have been dubbed over in a lot of his scenes, but he's on Guile's team. He's not in his inner circle, but he's the next guy. And he's
I know
the
you're
guy
talking about, because every time he talked, I said, this sounds like a dubbing.
He's the guy they watch Honda and Zangief fight on the little television while the Godzilla roar plays in the background.
Do you think they licensed that roar out, or this stole it?
I read the credits very carefully. I didn't see anything from Toho. A little bit suspicious. I also caught when Balrog pulls back a punch, he sort of revs his hand, and I think they play the Warner Brothers Tasmanian Devil spin sound when he does that.
Well, that one's a little easier to fly under the radar. The Godzilla fight lasted for a good, minute.
So here's an irony thing. Talk about legality in this movie. When D'Souza wrote the script, he was just naming Guile's organization, the United Nations. But Capcom said, are we allowed to use United Nations? And D'Souza's like, nobody ever asked permission for this. Capcom insisted. They wrote a letter to the United Nations, and United Nations wrote back, no, we will sue you. Now, you look at it from Capcom's point of view, they obviously wanted to adapt this into a video game. So they had plans for all this stuff to use in what they might be the Street Fighter 3. So you can understand their concern, but it is ironic they went ahead and shoved the Toho Godzilla roar in there.
Yeah, and they just made it basically the American nations.
Yeah, Allied Nations. AN.
It's the American
Just
nations.
as useless as the United Nations, I might add.
That's what we have. Once we buy Greenland, we'll be the American American
nations. Yeah, boy. Yeah, man. Gulf of American nations. We can all go around in those little invisible boats in the Gulf of the Allied Nations.
So, would you call this movie a good movie?
Yeah.
You thought about that a long time.
What's my criteria? You said good movie. What's my criteria here?
So, is this a good Street Fighter movie?
Yes.
I think I disagree.
Given the source material available at the time, paper-thin storyline, tons of characters, impossible to please everybody. We've seen how bad this could have go. We know how much worse this could have been. Every Street Fighter film project since then that's been live action has been worse. This is very enjoyable, and it's a legitimate, if loose, adaptation of the game.
So, there was something in the commentary that I heard, and basically the director, Steven Souza, said basically he didn't read a good review about this movie for 25 years. And now people are starting to appreciate it a little bit. And I think similar to the Mario movie, this was a very disappointing film for anyone who actually, one, cared about Street Fighter, but two, was a Jean-Claude Van Damme fan, which were the two audiences coming to see this movie. So as a Street Fighter movie, the kids came in, or the teenagers, and first off, there's no street fighting. And then two, the humor.
Well, the humor goes
early
over. They attempted.
Oh, they attempted and then they stopped before the first.
They attempted it. They had the cage matches,
but they didn't have cage matches. They had the introduction to a cage match.
Vega or Balrog. Hold on, I'm talking about Vega. Yeah, Vega had the claws, and Ryu and Ken and Sagat was watching.
I think you're reaching here.
man. And then Guile breaks it up for us.
The one fight you actually see before Ryu gets in there and they don't fight is Vega kill a faceless person, basically.
Well, we don't want a main character killed off that would be recognizable just that easily.
Well, my point is that was the only true street fight, and you didn't have two real characters. They could have had Ryu and him fight for a minute and then them bust through.
Yeah, I will confess I'm disappointed by the lack of a tournament. It could have been worked into this concept.
It could have been a side story.
That's the whole thing that brings just about all of the games together. A tournament is being held. And you can do everything else, that people come in for their own purposes. Chun-Li for revenge, and Guile perhaps as a military strategy.
No, an easy fix would have been Ryu and Ken. Their way of working themselves into the bad guys' organization is through the tournament.
Oh, yeah.
Or through a tournament.
Nice. Right.
So anyways, Street Fighter fans didn't like it because it wasn't what the game was, and the humor went over their heads because they were tied up with the disappointment that it wasn't what the game was. And then you have all the Jean-Claude fans, like me, coming in, and we're used to Kickboxer and Bloodsport and Jean-Claude Van Damme kicking everybody's ass. And this was just not exactly that.
Well, he kicked Bison's pretty good, so much so that he's going to make the next Bison feel it.
Oh, I love that line.
There's so many quotable lines in this movie.
Oh, looking for the quote. I wrote it down. Oh, here we go. So this is his rah-rah speech.
Oh, yeah.
So he's told that they're no longer going to attack, and they're going to start negotiating with the terrorists. And he gives a speech to the people where he says, basically, you can go home, but I'm going to kick that son of a bitch's Bison's ass so hard that the next Bison's wannabe is going to feel it. So who wants to go home and who wants to go with me?
Yeah.
That was great.
Filmed in Bangkok, the director said they had so many extras that it was so hard to communicate language-wise whether they were supposed to cheer or look sad, so they had to figure out creative ways to make them all react at the right time.
It's interesting. So one side note, because I just gave that line, was apparently, and I have no idea how, but apparently there had been a school shooting recently, and the first cut that was submitted to the MPA came back with an R rating. And everybody's like, what?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So then they went and they cut a bunch, which probably was a lot better film for what it's worth. So they made a bunch of cuts, cut out a lot of the blood. If something started to bleed, they just cut the scene short, kind of like you would for like a horror movie for cable back in the day.
Yeah.
When things actually were edited. And then the second time they cut back, they still had an R.
Oh no.
And like, what in the world? So then they go back and they cut more stuff, and it comes back with a G.
I have not heard this story before.
Yeah.
This is on the new disc you have?
The new interview with D'Souza. So they went from R to a G, which would be the kiss of death.
Yes. Yeah, you don't want that.
R is the kiss of death also because they can't be in Happy Meals and toys at the same time.
Right.
But it's like, so then they go back and they add the line. This is the only line allegedly added, which I find questionable based off what I just read. But basically, when Van Damme's going down the hole on the rope, and he sees the snakes and the spider crawls across him, and he added the line, 4 years of ROTC just so I can do this shit.
That got it to PG-13, really?
That allegedly got it to PG-13.
I don't believe it. There's got to be more to this story.
I agree. I question the G. Maybe it went down to PG.
Yeah, I don't know any world where this movie is a G-rated film. I
don't see how it's an R.
No, I don't either. Unless, Bison gets impaled or something.
But I want the R-rated version of this movie. I want the first cut.
There's an odd cut, which it relates to Dalsim. Because he gets some mutagen on him in some of the scuffles in the lab. But there's a very abrupt saying when he's escaping with Guile, where he's basically turned into his video game self. In the previous scene, he didn't look like that at all.
Oh, yeah, he changed his clothing entirely. Yeah.
Something happened there. Maybe. What about Guile about to shoot Blanca in the head? Doesn't that get you something close to a higher rating?
I mean, again, how could that ever be G?
Relatable violence. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a plot point there. It's an odd thing. Like, I don't understand Guile so quickly being willing to do that, since Charlie is such a big motivation for him in this movie.
No, I don't know. It's
an odd scene.
There's more to that story that's probably not written down and not really researchable. But I don't see any world where this is R, and I can't see any world where it's a G.
That's fair.
Yeah, they wanted the PG-13. They eventually got it. But one line of dialogue shouldn't be taking you from a G to a PG-13 either.
No.
Then one other note in terms of just some random things that are interesting. So the post-credit scene was not in the theatrical release.
They said that in the commentary I watched.
Okay.
Why was it not? Did they say? Why?
Well, out of deference to Raul Julia.
Because he actually died? Okay.
Yeah, before the movie came out.
6 weeks? They said 6 weeks after filming ended, he died. 6 weeks.
Had a stroke.
So it wasn't cancer. He died of stroke instead of cancer? Because he had cancer, and he knew that.
That was my understanding. I didn't look at it too much because I can't remember what type it was.
But cause of death might have been something more abrupt. Okay.
Well, and it could have been from the treatments, too.
Sure.
Yeah, so the movie ends with Bison's second death, and then you have, in tribute to Raul Julia, and then you have the credits, and then the post-credit scene is being revived once more, and they take him out. Or they take that out due to his recent death, but it is in all the home video and DVD releases.
Yeah, it's interesting to imagine what kind of life support systems he had set up, because his computer network sort of knows when his heartbeat has stopped, and it'll do whatever it takes to jump him back up, make him more of a monster each time.
Apparently he's got solar panels. I read somewhere that basically the second time he comes back is when the ceiling is broken enough for the sun hits something.
That's on the computer. Yeah, the computer voice says solar batteries.
Okay.
And somehow it restarts one solar batteries in Bison, and he does the super shredder hand punch coming out of the rubble.
Now, he had a very quick recovery time to be dead.
I sort of like they were going for that Princess Bride, mostly dead, all dead. Guile was, I forget what he said, half dead.
But yeah, all the good fighting's in the last 15 minutes of this movie.
Credit to Van Damme if he actually pulled that flash kick off. That looked hard.
He may have had some help, but he did stuff like that.
That is wild.
Yeah, old Jean-Claude. Underrated, somewhat forgotten, but at least he hasn't turned Russian like Steven Seagal.
Jean-Claude was way more entertaining to watch than Steven Seagal in his prime. I'll say that.
Absolutely. Steven Seagal's whole thing is I can fall with style.
Yep. No, and that's a good life skill, but it doesn't make for the greatest cinematography.
No. And then he would just pay people to fall down for him.
Yes. And he had his movements were sort of slower than Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid. You said maybe they should have sped this film up a little bit.
He's like a sloth now. He just kind of sneaks up on you.
Well, he sits in a chair until he has to get up, and then
you come to me.
Yeah. Well, we all get old, but some of us get old better than others. I'll say that.
Yeah, so they went with real actors and taught them how to fight. We'll put fight in air quotes. And instead of having fighters and teaching them how to act. And that probably was the right move. But it did strike me for like the first 60 to 70 minutes of this movie that there's not a lot of action of any sort going on. And the stuff that is very underwhelming.
A lot of fake news reports. They apparently had tons and tons of footage of all the news reports they filmed. They had to edit into the movie. The GNN, or was it GNT? Whatever Chun-Li works for.
They stayed, for the most part, outside of Bison. They were pretty grounded in realism, and there's really no special powers floating around this movie.
I wish that wasn't so. I wish it was a little bit more on the fantastic side. Especially Ryu and Ken. I wish they had Ki Blast or something like that.
Yeah, or throw a fireball at somebody, like even if it's like a fake one, like the one you might use in pro wrestling.
They fake it in this movie near the end when Ryu finally fights Vega.
I hate that effect.
He does the Hadouken hands, but you think he's just chest punching him. And they do a flash. Is that what they do for the camera?
It's like a little white flash. It's not a fireball, though.
It's about as disappointing as 1998 Godzilla when he roars and the car catches on fire. And you're like, oh, nope, he's not breathing fire.
No, the two closest things would be Van Damme's spin kick. It looked good. There's no special little lightning thing coming with it.
Flash kick, as in the game.
Flash kick. But like I said, it's just more impressive that he could do it.
Yes.
And then you have the electromagnetic Bison stuff, but that's not really a power as much as a mechanical device, which works.
They explain it. He gains the power of it. When I listened to the Laserdisc commentary from D'Souza, he said the actors who had experience in dance took to the martial arts training the best. So that would include the lady who did Cammy, who's a singer and a dancer, Kylie.
Kylie Minogue, which I think I have heard of her before, or at least seen her before.
She's been in stuff. And they said he said Ming Na Wen did a whole lot of her own stunts, the jumping around, pretty much anything that wasn't super dangerous. She was doing herself on camera.
Yeah, and I think she actually does have some martial art background. So
and dance too, I think. Yeah, dance and probably some martial arts.
But no, it's I don't know, underwhelming.
The director said he modeled his story a bit more on a James Bond. Not that we have a James Bond equivalent, but a James Bond villain and lair. And I sense a lot of G.I. Joe in this movie, and there was an effort of American Capcom to make Street Fighter into G.I. Joe, both in the literal G.I. Joe toy line deal with Hasbro and the animated series. Do you remember that one? I think it was on UPN or something.
I don't know if I ever watched it.
It's worth watching. It's not as good as the movie, in my opinion, but it follows the movie mentality.
Okay. Well, I don't necessarily disagree with the G.I. Joe take, but I think you need a side story in there that incorporates more street fighting as opposed to what they did.
And that's why the Ryu and Ken story should have been stronger. It's unclear why exactly they're there. They want to make money, I guess, but is this the best way they sought to do it?
So Ken, Damian Chapa, this may explain a little bit why a little underwhelming. He initially turned down the role. Then 3 days later, his agent said, "You can't turn this down." But he had never heard of Street Fighter.
Oh, no.
He had never heard of Jean-Claude Van Damme.
No. Who's this fool?
So he wanted to be a true thespian. Now, he knew Julia, and he respected that. He thought that was amazing. But that's what they were working with here. So
ironically, they have no scenes together. Well, they are in the same place a few times. Like
he met him one time. They had dinner the first night, and that's where he saw Julia was in such bad physical shape. And he said a tear came to his eye.
So it sounds like he was just holding it together as best as he could.
I think he had just had surgery for whatever cancer he had. And so he was at his worst state right at the beginning of the filming, and they basically built him up a little bit throughout the filming. So he was in better shape by the time it ended. But they had fit him for that suit prior to him getting real sick. So they had to basically add stuffing to his suit to fill it out.
He was a big guy in his younger years, if I remember.
Yeah, one of the people on the commentary said that he normally was like 220, 225, and they were guessing that he was probably about 155, 160 when he showed up to set.
You can sort of see it, because even though he's in big suits, the very, very slender neck, just kind of a little bit of emaciated face. But you know what? Boy, this is just a great performance by Raul Julia. I mean, my goodness. The way he elevates this part, probably the best actual actor in the movie, and he just goes into this role. Like, God bless Bob Hoskins. I love him, but he didn't love that. And he did fine as Mara, but he didn't love that role. But Raul Julia, man, that man embodied M. Bison.
No, he did great. And then he played it straight with a lot of enthusiasm, has some good quotes. He studied Mussolini prior to filming, so basically his mannerisms are based off Mussolini.
He does a little bit something different with his take on Bison that I like. It's partly the writer and director too. In his mind, he's not evil. In the game, he clearly is, and he embraces all that. But he believes he's bringing order to chaos. He's Darth Vader in his mind.
Yeah. Do you have the quote?
Which one? There's so many.
When he's giving the speech about his little paper city.
Well, so he wants to build. Is it Bisonopolis? Is what he's calling his city. And I guess he's starting his own country, too. I'm a little bit unsure about that. The so-called Shadaloo organization, is it going to be a country, Bisonopolis in Shadaloo?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Well, he talks about he wants the food court here, and he's going through it with his designer. He's given the speech to his sounding boards in this movie are, oddly enough, DJ and Zangief, which I think those are strange decisions to make DJ and Zangief his right and left hand men.
So I just want to say, too, I love Zangief in this movie.
Oh, he's hilarious.
And who knew that a Russian could be a good guy?
Well, things had changed by 1994 in Soviet relations.
He might be the first good Russian ever portrayed on film.
Even though he's a villain in this movie, right?
But he doesn't know it.
Well,
he thinks he's fighting for the good guy.
It's revealed at the end of the movie, DJ was always in this for the money. Zangief somehow thought he believed that Bison, the virtue and all that.
Yeah, so Bison, he's basically saying he's upset that people don't like him. He doesn't understand why everybody thinks he's mad. And this is pretty much a quote, but he wants to create the perfect genetic soldier, not for power or evil,
no,
for good.
Indeed.
And then this part's a summary, but they will kill them all until everyone is under the Pax Bisonica.
Ooh, Pax Bisonica, I like that.
Yeah. And then peace will reign, and all humanity will bow to me in humble gratitude.
He does have a god complex.
He does.
I like his eulogy when he's told in the fake news report that Guile has died. And DJ says, "That's great news, General." He says, "On the contrary." He says, I had hoped to fight him in honorable combat.
Respectful combat.
Respectful combat.
Oh, the road not taken.
And then I would snap his spine.
Yeah. Actually, I think he said that about Guile directly before he made the comment about wanting to create the perfect genetic soldier, not for power or evil, but for good.
So, Julia, the expression is choose the scenery. Chewing on the scenery. And we talked about Peter Cushing doing that when we looked at Frankenstein movies and all that. Oh, Julia just consumes the scenery in this movie.
Yes. And honestly, Jean-Claude, we weren't getting the best Jean-Claude in this movie. Now, they weren't giving him the best material either. He does have a few humorous little scenes where he thinks he's being surrounded by the bad guy's army, and he pulls out his pocket knife because it's all the only weapon he's got, and they all start backing up, and he thinks it's because of him.
It's like Indiana
Then he turns
Jones.
around. Yeah, then he turns around and sees all the good guy armies behind him, and it's bigger.
Yeah. And then, Julia finally gets his one-on-one battle with Guile. So that's nice. They both get to have that.
In the trailer, they show the second death of Bison in the trailer.
I believe when he gets knocked into the TVs.
Yeah. I mean, they obviously don't show him dying, but they show the climax. It's like, man, it's just something about mentally, you just don't remember any of these scenes when you're actually in the theater. You just assume it's part of a fight, earlier. Then it doesn't happen, and you don't realize you haven't seen it. Then you see the ending. It's like, well, what the crap? They gave that away.
So if you spend the most money on a special effect, you're going to want to show it in the trailer. It's just the way that goes.
Yeah. Now, they did not spend a lot of money on the Blanca special effect, in my opinion.
Blanca, to me, is probably an even bigger disappointment than the Ryu and Ken plot. Because they spend so much time on Charlie and Guile and Blanca and Dalsim, and it really goes nowhere as far as the resolution of this movie's plot.
No, and I think they are probably thinking about the sequel in that moment, and I get you're introducing 20 characters. You do kind of have to set some things up for the sequel, so that doesn't bother me. And we never really saw
they spent on it.
I agree. And Dalsim, we never really saw his powers take form. It was kind of the equivalent of the leader in the Incredible Hulk movie when he gets the stuff dripping on his head at the end, but you never actually see the leader, which hopefully we'll get to see him soon.
I had Mandela effect. I always had this memory that Dalsim was able to extend his arm at one shot in this movie. I don't think it ever happened.
Well, I don't think it did either unless there was a deleted scene, which is plausible. But like we said, he did change clothes at some point.
Uh-huh.
But Blanca's visual look, it's like they took the old Hulk paint from the Lou Ferrigno days, and then they took his wig and they kind of ripped off some of it so he looked like he was bald, bleached it red or dyed it red. It's just like, this is like a Rose Art Lou Ferrigno.
So I'm thinking this movie invented the backstory of merging the Charlie character with Blanca, or as they call them in this movie, the Carlos Blanca, who in the game is a Brazilian child who's lost in the forest as a young man, and he grows up somehow to be an electrical monster. So they try to make it plausible how a man becomes the monster, but they're also taking the Charlie character and meshing Guile's backstory in. And the cartoon followed that, but none of the games went there except as an occasional joke.
I think they set some stuff up to be interesting in the sequel if they chose to, but everything about Blanca was disappointing in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And he's the one character that could have powers, like, really.
Yep.
And we don't really get to see him.
No electric shocks.
No
extendable arms for Dalsim. It just feels like, why is Guile spending all this time in the laboratory? And then they basically tell him, sorry, we can't live in public. We're just going to find our own way out of the collapsing bunker. Why? Guile somehow gets out. They think he's dead. We never really see what happens to Blanca and Dalsim. It's an odd way to resolve that.
Now, I will say, almost everyone in this movie gets a video game accurate costume relatively early.
Maybe halfway through.
Well, Giles comes up in it.
Yeah.
The boxer's the boxer.
But he's not in that suit until he's in the Bison headquarters, Balrog. He finds gloves somewhere. I don't know where he finds the gloves in the...
So, all right, I'm just looking at the list. Guile, Balrog, really. I'll give him credit for that. Cammy, Bison, Zangief, I don't know about DJ, I don't remember his character. Vega, Sagat. That's quite a few. The problem is it's not the ones you want. everyone wants to see Chun-Li, everybody wants to see Ryu, and everyone wants to see Ken. And Ken and Ryu get the worst.
Well, yeah, they show up in street clothes, and they get Bison uniforms midway through. And by the end of the movie, they decide we'll just tear the Bison patches like Velcro off our gis.
I mean, I guess they weren't really fighting anybody anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
I mean, the Chun-Li outfit is a little bit off from what she would normally wear, but it's close enough. They went with her red variant instead of blue, but
probably because Bison was in the red.
Right. There was the thing Bison gave her to wear when he was trying to seduce her. The best scene in the movie. The day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday, delivered with a dead-on, calm delivery. That whole scene, she's given her whole speech about her father, and Julia is changing into something more comfortable, and he has all his hats, his seasonal colors that he switches through.
He's changing into his silk suit.
And he's keeping eye contact with her every time he can, and the way they cut the cameras, you never see him without the hat. And he's intently listening to her story. And when he says he's sorry, he doesn't remember any of it. You genuinely believe he's sorry that he just didn't have memory of it. Not that he invaded the village or killed her father. He was generally interested in the conversation.
Yeah, respectable villain. Well, and also, I think he kind of kills her little quest. Like, up to that point, it had been like her life mission to take him out. And I think it deflated her. They had their little skirmish. But from then on out, Van Damme says, go get the hostages out. And she's like, okay. So she's willing to let Van Damme do his thing. Which, Van Damme's vendetta really didn't get clarified.
Charlie.
It was alluded.
He's captured. So you're not sure why he wants to.
No. I think there's a family thing going on there.
Oh,
Van Damme wants to kill Bison. Remember, when he turns Chun-Li away earlier, he says, this isn't about your personal vendetta. And then when everybody's out of the room, he says, this is about my personal vendetta.
So again, in the games, it's because Bison killed Charlie. But maybe it's something different here.
When they're in the Tesla boat, the Cybertruck boat, he puts a cassette tape, which plays video. Don't understand that. And he starts seeing video of his family from back in the day.
No, it's his date and Charlie and his date.
Okay.
They seem to be dates more than anything else.
I thought there was a child. Maybe there wasn't. Well, anyways, it makes you think that he killed someone that wasn't Charlie. Because Charlie, he already had that
in the
vendetta.
Games, Guile has the wife and the daughter that he's estranged from. He's off in his military adventures.
Well, anyways, I think there's something there. Maybe it got cut out. Some clarifying dialogue.
It was not done well.
Because it makes you think that he has experienced loss beyond Charlie due to Bison.
Could be, but I think it was all about Charlie, and that's why it's so odd that whole plot thread just didn't seem like it went anywhere. That whole deal with the Chun-Li scene, that has stuck with me when I think about just vendettas that people have against others because they perceive somebody slighted them or upset them. And it's entirely possible the person that you're so mad over thought nothing of whatever grievance you have against them. And so it's a one-sided feud.
No, that's a common theme in life. I can't tell you how many employees that I told, like, you can be angry at that person all you want for what they did, but they're not thinking about it, and you're giving them too much credit to think they planned this.
That's
like
true.
It's personal for you. It is not personal for them. So you're wasting your mental energy.
In Chun-Li's case, her father was still dead. So
no, she had it's a little different with her.
Yeah,
but the principle's still there. It's like you're overthinking this in some ways. Like you might be right, but don't assume that they care.
It's just Tuesday, man. No hard feelings.
Yeah, I will say the American nations in this movie, this is not a real competent looking organization.
Allied nations, not American, allied nations.
Oh, they're all Americans though, or dubbed to be American.
Well, okay, that's the interesting quote. It's a very diverse cast ethnically, but just about all of them, with a few exceptions like Sawada, the Japanese guy, they are native English-speaking actors. A lot of them are just American citizens. The biggest exception is going to be Van Damme, who plays the most in-your-face American character of fiction, and he does not have the most natural of English accents.
No. So Capcom was hell-bent on getting Van Damme once they saw he was available. And in their defense, I mean, he's a picture-perfect Guile. So,
when he does the punch on Bison and they do the bicep, he's got that shag tattoo. It's a great shot.
It is. And so the director, DeSouza, he told him, like, I'm really concerned about his accent and people buying into this. Well, Capcom, based in Japan, had only seen the dubbed versions of his movies. So they really weren't concerned with it because they had never really heard his accent.
It doesn't matter to them.
So D'Souza said, fine, we'll work around it. So there was dialogue in the movie to explain that he was actually from Louisiana in order to explain the accent.
I don't recall that. I don't remember any of it.
It got cut out. That line of dialogue got cut while they were trimming. So ultimately, he was concerned. They weren't. He had a workaround. The workaround got cut out. I don't think people care. It's Jean-Claude Van Damme.
You feel like if Capcom modeled Balrog on M. Bison, they would have thought about Van Damme when they were making Guile to be a stereotypical American.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a little disappointed they made E. Honda Hawaiian in this movie. Didn't they do that? He's a sumo, but he's Hawaiian.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I don't know if it was just actors available.
Because the actor was Hawaiian, maybe, or something like of that tradition, ethnicity.
Let me click on him, see if I can see.
Yeah.
He was born in California, so if he's not Hawaiian, he's from some other island, put it that way. But yeah.
Do you think they should have swapped Balrog and DJ? Put DJ on Chun-Li's news team, and Balrog is one of the Bison enforcers?
I don't know. I didn't care about DJ as a video game character, and I didn't care about him in this movie either. On the flip side, Balrog, I enjoyed as a video game character. I was really distracted by his haircut in this movie. So I don't know. I'm torn. I was underwhelmed with Honda also. So Chun-Li was great. I didn't care about her crew.
I wondered about the whole news team because it just doesn't feel right to those characters. But again, they got to work them in somehow. And if it's not them, who else are you going to put in those roles?
Yeah. So I think part of the problem with this movie is that there's just half of the characters have negative charisma. So while Guile and Chun-Li and Cammy to some degree, and that's about it for the heroes. And then now the villains are a little better off. You got Bison, Zangief, Vega, Sagat. Those are all good. It all seems fine for what his role is. So 5 of the 6 bad guys are good, with DJ being the lame one. Whereas the heroes, you have 2 or 3 good ones, and then you got Ken, Ryu, and Charlie, and Thunderhawk, who I wasn't sure who that was for most of the movie.
Yeah.
And even Honda. Like, they're just all kind of lame, charismatic, less people.
I appreciate how they kept the rivalry and the tension between Bison and Sagat. Because Sagat is not just a typical minion. He's his own guy, a former champion and boss. And he's got an alliance with Bison. But there's going to be tension between them.
Yeah. I think Vega improved as the movie went on. His comic-accurate fighting outfit at the beginning was a little too much with the socks. But once he lost the socks, I liked it.
I appreciated when he finally got to fight Ryu. Ryu knocked his claw off, which was always something I took pleasure in doing on the video game. Did you fear the Vega fight when you were going through the tournament mode? Because that was sort of one of those walls a lot of people had to get over.
He was a very cheap character.
But once you know what he does and how to counter it, you can handle him fairly easily.
Hey, when the computer wants to win, the computer wants to win.
You got to counter those off-the-wall things, and you got to do it every time, because if you let him connect, it's rough. But you got to know what he does and how to counter it.
So that reminds me, in the non-fight between Ryu and Vega, I think it's a perfect example of what's wrong with this movie. So Vega comes in as the champion, handsome guy, very well-defined build, got the cool claws, and people are cheering him. And then they put Ryu in the ring, and they take his shirt off, and you have a less developed, shorter.
It's true.
He doesn't look as good as Vega. There's nothing about him that says this guy's impressive. And he swings a plastic sword around for a minute, and all the ladies in the crowd are swooning over him, and you're like, huh?
It's true. Vega is the more impressive guy than Ryu in this film. So, well, women want a new flavor, I suppose.
But they thought the audience was going to, buy that. And everyone had to have the same thought. It's like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
Because he hadn't fought yet.
No. It's one thing if he fights and wins. Yeah, he has to win or he has to hold his own to win the crowd over, like Rocky in Russia against Drago.
Yeah. No one ever feared Ryu in this movie.
Yeah, it's too bad. I think arguably he's the main franchise character. Maybe not every game, but...
Absolutely. Now, he was the most popular character. I don't know. I understand why they used Guile the way they did here, because they had Van Damme. I get that. But Ryu has to be a main character, and they try to make him one, but no one cares about him.
So the great thing about Ryu is he's always looking for the next challenge. That's his in-game story. And in this movie, again, with the motivations vaguely defined, first he's out for money, then Guile recruits them a second time to help them free the hostages, maybe, or at least until the military gets there.
Well,
And
first to
Ken
infiltrate and to find out where his lair is. That's the first.
Oh, yeah. And just Ryu decides, I've found something worth fighting for. And Ken's like, no, the military's here. We got to go. And I'm kind of sympathetic to Ken. I mean, I know there's hostages, but
they're trained. We're not.
Yeah, the military would probably be okay with you evacuating too. It's kind of the way I looked at it. But at least we get a fight in the locker room. It's very Karate Kid Cobra Kai. Instead of a street fight, we get a locker room fight with 2-on-2.
That was filmed later on in Canada, by the way.
Okay, British Columbia. There we go.
They came back and filmed that. So you got any other scenes in this movie that stood out?
Oh, there's so many. When they're in the tent, and Chun-Li has announced via video they're going to blow the weapons up, and they're watching the truck roll down the hill on the TV screen. And Zangief yells out, quick, change the channel. I busted a gut. I had to pause the movie. You forget about that movie after a while, or you forget about that line just coming right there, and you're like, that's the way DJ just looks at him.
That was good. That was a good scene.
DJ has underrated physical comedy in his reactions. When Bison is watching the military come to the base near the end, and he says, defeat is an option. He's like, DJ, we will stand together. You know, he's giving this monologue, and DJ's just walking quietly out the back. You almost feel like Bison would be more disappointed than mad when he found out he'd been deserted.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
man,
absolutely.
He had a heart. He's like, we're in this together, my brother. Nope. Oh. Okay, it is funny when DJ steals the money box or the money briefcase, and he and Sagat, they swim out, and they finally open it, and it's Bison bucks.
All right. So we're quite a ways in here, so probably need to go ahead and give this movie a rating. I propose Bison bucks.
Ooh, Bison bucks. I like it. Like it a lot. I'd like to give it a 4. I can't. Honestly, when you just talk about the basic plot and the sub-story and the shortcomings, it would end up close to a 3 for me, but the sheer memorableness and the performances of Raul Julia himself gets a full 5 out of 5 Bison bucks. So I'm going to up it to 3.5 Bison bucks out of 5.
So I know this is a theoretical, right? But if this movie didn't have Van Damme and it didn't have Julia.
Oh, if it doesn't have Julia, I can't conceive of this movie. It is impossible for me to think of this without Raul Julia.
So it doesn't even exist.
Ming Na Wen does great. Ming Na Wen, she's great. But yeah, Julia is just essential for everything about this.
Okay, so you're giving it 3.5. Is that right?
Yeah, Bison bucks.
I'm going to give Van Damme a Bison buck. I'm going to give Julia a Bison buck. I'll give Ming Na Wen a Bison buck.
All right.
But I'm taking away half a Bison buck for Ken, for Ryu, for Honda,
no,
for Balrog,
no, he's a bit player,
and for Blanca. So that's 1, 2, and Thunderhawk. He loses 1. So Balrog, Blanca, Thunderhawk, Honda. That's 2 Bison bucks. Ryu and Cam's down another 3. So that cancels out. That's
some crazy exchange rate you got going on here.
I will give the costumes a Bison buck.
Okay.
I will give the cinematography a Bison buck.
Yeah.
And I'll give the director, the Souza, a Bison buck. So that's back up to 3. But I'm taking away a Bison buck for the plot. It doesn't work. There's no
what
street
about
fighting.
Special effects?
There are no special effects. They don't do anything.
Special effects are explosions and all that other stuff. There's plenty of explosions in this.
Jean-Claude gets a Bison buck for his spinny kick thing.
Yeah.
But Ryu loses a Bison buck for his little flash hit.
His Hadouken. There wasn't a Hadouken. Yeah.
Bison and Blanca, they kind of take each other out. What you get for Bison, you lose for Blanca.
Oh, no.
Too much respect for the Hulk.
Bison fully overwhelms everything else about this movie. He is the great American Bison.
No, I'm saying as good as his special effects were, they get, like, Blanca's were just as bad.
Oh, we're talking about special effects.
Yeah, special effects.
Fine.
So I think we're at 2 Bison bucks at this point.
I don't even know anymore.
So I'll give it 2. There's a lot of good things individually about this movie, and the the dialogue is less painful today. I get some more of the humor now. I kind of get where they're going.
It is better in clips than a full sit through. Yeah. If you just watch the clips, it's probably gonna be better.
Yeah, so I give it $2 Bison bucks.
All right.
I recommend people watching the movie. I recommend the Steelbook if you can get it for a good price. I think I got mine for $13. It wasn't sealed, but it was.
I gotta look into that. See if I can get a Bison poster.
But, yeah, it's an interesting movie. I know you're probably gonna argue that it's better than Mortal Kombat.
I won't actually, but I do enjoy it more.
Okay.
I won't argue it's better, but I do prefer watching this. Now, you would have thought by the year 2024 that just concluded, we would have had an excellent live-action Street Fighter movie by now, but we have not received that. We've had attempts at them. And this is still the best Street Fighter movie we got that isn't animated.
Yeah, I heard the one they made a few years ago was horrible with Chun-Li, but I have not watched it. So
it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I was dumbfounded. Well, I was disturbed. You talk about gross out. I mean, that earned an R. I don't remember if there was an R cut. That was getting into some crazy nasty stuff. It's like, this is not my Street Fighter movie. Now, I have not seen all the way through, which started as a web episode series, the Street Fighter Assassin's Fist, which is a more Ken and Ryu focused story. I bought the DVD, and it turns out it only had the bonus disc on it, so I sort of missed out on that. But from what I've seen of it, it's like, well, okay, great. They have the art of Shoryuken and all that, but it's not particularly fun.
If they had taken this movie and made it the equivalent of like a Rambo 2 or Rambo 3 in terms of like the violence and just like made it an R movie, but had these over-the-top colorful characters, I think people could have gotten behind that. Now, you would have lost your merchandising at Donald's, but there's a movie, I think it would have been nice. So they should have released this and then released the unedited version or the ramped-up version a few years later.
To rentals. Put it out on rental.
Yeah, and then you would have made your kid money, and you would have actually had a pretty good movie after the fact.
Maybe.
I still think Street Fighter 2, maybe by an indie company, with Jean-Claude coming back with maybe one or two other characters. Maybe you make that Charlie movie, but you get Lou Ferrigno to play him. There's something there. There's something there. All right, well, that's been Street Fighter from 1994. Ironically, you can't say Street Fighter the movie because that's actually the name of the game, but you know.
Yes, the movie, the game. Oh.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.